Alrighty, hello everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the August 2026 Q&A. It is so good to be speaking with you guys again. I've been very busy these past few weeks. I do want to say I did have a friend visiting for most of July. It was an amazing time, but it was also a very socially exhausting time. So I'm still kind of recovering from that. I also had a lot of stuff to do even while he was visiting, trying to keep up with audios and commissions and all that. So if I sound just a little bit low energy today, that is why. But that being said, it was an amazing time. We did a lot of things. We got to see the pro shot of Hadestown together, and oh my god, it was so good. If you ever have the chance to see Hadestown, please take it. It is so fantastic. Anyways, that's me being a massive fan of Hadestown. That's nothing. But I did want to let you guys know that before we continue, in case anyone's like, wow, you sound really low energy. I know I do. But it is being handled. I'm recovering slowly but surely. With that being said, we are not here for my ramblings about my life. I guess technically we kind of are, but we are also here to answer your guys' lovely questions, of which there are numerous today. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and we'll get into it. So, got a lot of questions. We'll start today with a baby shark who asks, I was wondering about a new giant that is bad and cruel, like to the point that it destroys houses, eats other people, and things like that. I'd be so happy to see that. I mean, yeah, I can see about something like that sometime. I did have a rather cruel giant in the works at one point, but I'm not sure about them. They've gone through a lot of rewrites, and honestly, I'm still not super satisfied. I feel like the story I wanted to tell with them just feels a little bit flimsy, if that makes sense. Like, it very much feels kind of contrived, kind of like, I don't know. It needs work, is what I'm saying. But hopefully by this time next year, they'll be out. They were going to be for Halloween of this year, but I have swapped a few things around. So we will be getting something interesting for Halloween, but not this particular character. I need to work on them. That said, there is something in the works, so stay tuned, I guess. Thank you, though, for your request, Baby Shark. Next is Nezuko Akatori, who says, I do wonder what it would be like for one of the giants to have a stomach ache and be comforted by the listener. I'm not sure what it would be like for a giant to have a bad tummy ache. The question just came out of my mind, or into my mind. I mean, yeah, I could also see an argument with that. I do imagine that giants can get stomach aches as well, right? Like, they're not human, but I feel like they have biology, and they do need to consume food, so I feel like they could also, in theory, get stomach aches as well. And they definitely get, like, aches and pains in general, right? So, I think ultimately something I just kind of struggle with is, first off, I will say this is a personal flaw, and it's nothing against you guys. It's just, I have struggles with this, and I really need to get over it. But I do kind of struggle with the, like, reverse comfort style audios. If there's not, like, a reasoning behind them, like, oh, this will progress the character's, like, story, this will help their character arc, whatever, I really struggle with recording audios that involve reverse comfort, because I'm like, oof, that's just like, I don't know, it's weird to me to do. But like again, that's a me problem, that's not a you guys problem, it's something I need to get over. So objectively I should be doing more so that I can get more comfortable with them. But the other thing with especially like aches and pains kind of audios is I really never know how to make them sound believable and not just like I'm like moaning into the microphone. Like I just don't ever know how to make it sound like oof, ow, I'm in pain, and like oof, ow, I'm in so much pain. Anyways, that being said, I'm not like, I wouldn't be uncomfortable recording something like that. I think it really is just like, I need to get over myself and also just try to figure out how to make it sound believable and not like too dramatic. I don't know, hopefully that all made sense. Point being, I do definitely think that giants could get stomach aches. I think it'd be cute to explore that. And I've actually explored that just recently in a commission. I think it might have been a private one. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But yeah, definitely doable. I'll definitely see about it in the future. Oof. Thank you for your question, Nezuko Akatori. Let's see. Next, Tabbycat94 asks, what do you think would happen if all your characters hung out together for a day? Oh gosh. I think friendships would be made, almost certainly, and enemies would almost certainly be made as well. I think Aether wouldn't get along with people, and I think that would probably cause some friction. But I have my personal theories. I think that I don't think Ryback and Hugh would get along very well. I've had this opinion for a while. I think that of the two duos of Chaudhry and Ryback and Nathan and Hugh, Nathan and Chaudhry wouldn't get along because they both have like kind of conflicting forms of magic. Nathan is a very like vibes-based magic person. He uses pixie dust and he's like, I just kind of want this thing to happen. So he doesn't really understand like the how it happens, just knows that it does. And meanwhile, Chaudhry has obviously gone to school for it, so he knows all about the how. And I feel like Ryback and Hugh are both major people pleasers. So I feel like they would have trouble getting along because they would both just kind of be like, well, what do you want to do? And they would wind up just doing things that neither one of them wanted to do because they just kind of assumed the other one did. But I think, aside from that, my little theory about how they'd interact, obviously I'd have to actually put them in a room together. I think the easiest things to say would be like, I feel like it would be a fine experience. Like, I don't think it would be a good experience for everybody, but I think everybody would leave being like, yeah, okay. It was okay. maybe we wouldn't do it again. But like, I now know a couple new people that I'd like to hang out with. I do think Clement would get along with basically everybody. Ryback would get along with basically everybody. I think Hugh would also be really uncomfortable because he like barely knows about magic. He knows that Nathan can do it, but that's about it. And he like barely knows about like potions, spells, that kind of stuff. So I feel like with that, and also with him really not knowing much about like non-human sized species, he'd be probably pretty freaked out being surrounded by like a giant, a cat boy, multiple mages, a naga, and so on and so forth. I feel like he'd be pretty weirded out by it. I also imagine that with Atos being there, if he was there, assuming that we're talking about the people, like just all my characters, not just the people who all kind of share a universe together, and a specific timeline together. I imagine that Atos would really enjoy sharing stories with everybody, like hearing about what the present day is like, as well as sharing what like the future is like for him. and talking about all that. I think he'd really like that. I also think, like, in terms of like lasting effects, like assuming this isn't just like a, everyone goes in this big multiverse crossover event and then they forget about it afterwards, assuming like they keep this knowledge, I think that Aether and Shadri would probably become closer after the fact. Particularly because I feel like Aether and Nathan would get along somewhat begrudgingly. And I feel like Nathan would hear like a few too many times Aether talk about like, oh, my dear brother, it does blah, 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 blah. And he'd be like, you know what? We need to fix some of this. We need to sort out what the fuck your two's problems are. Because you guys seem to get along solely because you're siblings. So I feel like that's something that would happen. I also feel like Hugh would also probably develop a kind of like, I guess, anxiety or like kind of self-consciousness. Because like I think Hugh is really used to being the big strong guy who helps people out. Like he's not the biggest guy ever, right? He's like I think 6 foot even. So he's definitely not like the biggest guy ever. But he is big and he's also surrounded by micros or tinies. And so I feel like when he sees someone who's not just like bigger than him to like a kind of attainable degree, like, oh, you work out a bit more, you get like maybe like platform shoes or something and you're roughly on the same level as them, someone who is literally like so much bigger than him and so much stronger than him. To like an unattainable degree, I feel like he'd be kind of upset by that, being like, oh, this isn't just like someone who I'm kind of on the same level as. I'm just a little bit shorter. I'm a little bit less buff, or I, need to work out a little bit harder, or whatever. This is like, oh, this is someone who I couldn't be the big strong guy for if I wanted to be. And I think he'd be kind of upset by that and not know what to do about it. So yeah, some good things, some bad things. But yeah, so I think those are the big things. I'll probably have to figure out more at some point because like at some point, right, there's got to be a large gathering of the characters. I originally wanted to do that for one of my celebratory audios, and it's really hard. I remember I wanted to do one of the Q&As, actually, that's what it was. I wanted to do one of the Q&As where everybody could respond and, like, talk between each other. So, like, for example, someone could ask, like, Hugh a question and be like, what's your favorite color? And Hugh could be like, oh, I don't know. And then, like, Nathan or someone could interject and be like, well, back when you were a kid, your favorite color was pink or whatever. Actually, that'd be kind of cute, right? Hugh liking pink as his favorite color for, like, when he was a kid. I think it fits him. Anyways, but yeah, I think that could be fun, but it also, like, requires so much work, so much effort. So, let me see. Yeah. I was just making sure that was all the things I had to say. For now, though, that's my best guess. That's what I think would be the most probable to happen. Like I said, we'll have to see, I guess, in the future what exactly comes to be. But yeah. But thank you for your question, TabbyCat94. I do appreciate it. Abby Ryan asks, I just want to say your giant impressions are really good. And do you actually eat the mic? So self-admittedly, I grabbed this question from a different audio. And I do apologize for that. But it was on one of the previous Q&A audios, so I wasn't sure if you wanted to include this question into the actual Q&A or not. So I figured I'd just go ahead and do it. But thank you for your kind words. I really do appreciate that. And I do not actually eat the mic for my VOR audios or NOMS-based audios. Usually what I do is I have my Blue Yeti, that is what I'm using right now. And I do that for the speaking parts of my audios. And then, I can get the kind of mouth sounds audios from this as well, because I can just lean in and be like, and then I have a Tascam field microphone that I can press up against my belly and record the stomach noises. So, it'll be those two, and I will just use them as a dynamic duo. So, yeah. Thank you for your question, Abby Ryan. Next, Awesome Pony 3947 asks, do you do anything to celebrate Hug a Tiny or Hug a Giant Day? Gosh, I really should. It's those are holidays that kind of sneak up on me a little bit. Like, I forget about them until like 2 days beforehand, and then like I've already got my schedule lined up. I need to like scramble to make any art for it. Yeah. But I feel like I really do need to be on top of that though, right? Like it's like the GT holiday. So I should probably like put those like reminders for them, I should say. I should put reminders for them in my calendar so I actually remember. But yeah. Thank you for your question, Awesome Pony 3947. And now I reveal that there was a cut just now because there was a fly in my room that was buzzing right in front of the microphone multiple times while I tried to answer this next question. So I had to go deal with it. Thankfully it meant I got to turn on my fan for a little bit because it's toasty in this room. Regardless, we have a question from Kawolfi Audio, who asks, have you ever thought about trying a Giant Prince x Tiny Princess or Peasant listener audio, or a Tiny Prince x Giant Princess or Peasant listener audio? And not really. I have thought about doing something a little bit more fantasy themed a couple times. There was at one point the concept of like possibly doing a fantasy alternate universe with my characters, featuring, I remember at one point the idea was mulled around about like a blacksmith, Nathan, and a like fae or elven nobleman, Hugh, because Hugh's family does come from quite a bit of wealth, so, that kind of concept with him. But it never really went anywhere. It'd be fun to kind of look at, maybe. There was also some ideas about like a giant knight character. Again, didn't really go anywhere far. But that being said, if you guys would like me to do something more fantasy themed, please do let me know. I know a couple of you guys have already said you'd like to see something a bit more fantasy themed, but if you guys would like something like that, absolutely. I will also say I do try to keep all my audios as gender neutral as possible, which does create some kinds of difficulty when it comes to like princes, princesses, things with a specific like gendered term associated with them. You could just go like Your Highness or like Your Majesty if you want to do like a king or queen. I believe those are the terms. I don't think I've gotten them reversed. But like, you could just do that. But there also comes, some small difficulties there. But I think it'd be relatively easy to work around it. But yeah, that being said, I haven't really thought about like specifically some cute GT royalty stuff before. Like royalty, ex-royalty. So if you guys would be interested in seeing something like that, please feel free to let me know. And I might see what I can do. Always the caveat is I can never promise anything, but I can say that I will at least look into it. Thank you very much for your question, Kawilfi Audio. I do appreciate it. So let's see here. Our next question is from... Oh, I've lost my place. The Hand Fiend, who asks, hello, it's the Hand Fiend here. It's been a while since I asked a question, and I figured I'd say hello and ask a question. Thank you very much, Hand Fiend. I'm not sure if you're a fan of superhero media, but I must ask, would vigilantes with size-based abilities ever come to the channel, or would that be strictly commission work? I'm obsessed with size-based powers, and I'm curious. Also, since magic exists, as we already know exists in this world, does Chaudhry write his own spells and potions, or is it strictly from sources he already has? I swear this is related because I'm curious if there's a possibility in this universe you created if biology powers and magic can coexist. Have a good one, stay hydrated, and Hand Fiend out. Thank you very much for your question, and thank you for the reminder to stay hydrated. I will actually do so right now. And if you are awake and you're not trying to sleep, I advise you to do the same, listener. That being said, for your question, it is funny that you mentioned this, because, as lovely people on Patreon might know, I did at one point create a pair of audios meant to become a full series based around the listener being a superhero who could alter the sizes of things, including themselves. Basically, they wind up capturing their supervillain rival, who was the speaker, and they shrank him and caught him in, I recall it was like a sticky trap, like for rodents and pests and such. And it was meant to be like this whole big story, but it didn't wind up reaching the channel because it was recorded around the same time that Dispatch had come out. And it was around the time that Dispatch was getting really popular, if I recall correctly. Not just like, oh, it's out, but like it was... I couldn't look on YouTube without seeing at least one thing about it. And I really didn't want to seem like a rip-off of Dispatch, so I put it onto my Patreon as cut content instead, and I don't know if I'll ever continue that specific series. But the way I have it set up in my world currently, to answer your question properly, is that some folks do have, whether through like genetic mutation or some sort of magic ritual or like as a gift from a deity, they do have natural abilities they can call upon that aren't just inherently magic. A good example of this actually would be Oliver, the size-shifting cleric. Because as size-shifters have the ability to change sizes entirely unrelated to their ability to perform magic. It is explained at one point in an audio that in essence, the way that his particular size shifting works is that he sort of has a well of magic within himself that has mutated to let him change sizes, and it's not affected by, nor does it affect his ability to do magic. But yeah, that to say, like natural abilities definitely do exist within the world. And for a bit more clarification, in the future where Atos is from, the same does apply. Magic probably still exists, but I imagine at this point it's been classified more as like an additional science rather than like as a magic, as a mystical thing. It's probably like been researched enough that people can kind of look at it more scientifically. In the same sense that like alchemy would be like a type of chemistry at this point. So yeah, there's definitely some ability for magic and superpowers, so to speak, to intermingle in this world I've created. I would say I don't know much about superhero stuff, but I would say it's a bit like X-Men, I think, where like a superpower is less like, oh, I have this like special thing about me, I come from an other world or whatever. It's definitely more like mutation based. It's like this is an aspect of my body that has been changed to let me use this power. But I think it's definitely doable. I think that like superheroes, vigilantes, that kind of thing definitely do exist. So yeah, definitely possible. I hope this answers your question. And thank you very much for asking. Um, but yeah, do let me know if you guys would like to see something a bit less, fantasy magic, and a bit more like low magic, superhero, vigilante, whatever kind of vibe. I'd love to know if there's an audience for that, and if there is, I'd be happy to work on that with y'all. Let's see. Next question is from Zed, who asked, "What, in your opinion, is the best RPG and/or TTRPG class?" Oh no. I guess it kind of depends on the game. My personal preference tends to be focused more towards like fun over function, if that makes sense. Like usually, like a functional character will usually be a fun character. But like for example, I play a lot of Warframe, and in Warframe, there's a character named Atlas, whose entire kit is basically just centered around being able to kill enemies really, really well. And one of his core abilities is kind of just a one-hit KO punch. So, one way you can play him is kind of just pressing that button over and over again. And obviously this is a major oversimplification of his character. But it does mean that when I'm playing him, especially because of how certain other buttons of his are kind of a bit more difficult to really make useful, it kind of means you just mash that one button, and so he's functional, but he's not very fun. Meanwhile, with a character like Noko, his whole kit revolves around using like 3 of his 4 abilities interchangeably to set up a field that increases ability strength and rejuvenates your mana, basically. A field that does damage over time, and then basically a little bouncy volleyball that can hit enemies and bounce off of them, as well as the mushrooms that you've created that create those 2 other fields that do a lot of damage. So because of the amount of setup you have to do for him, he's not always really functional, because you have to make sure you can actually sit still and do that. But when you can play him, he's very fun. So yeah, that's what I'd say. I'd say that I tend to go for like fun over function in that sense. So with that in mind, when it comes to like D&D, specifically 5th edition, and none of that like 2024 stuff, I'm talking about the old 5th edition. In D&D, I find that classes like clerics and paladins are very fun, because they have a sort of like built-in quest, and that they're religious, so they automatically have a way to interact with the world. Plus, they have a lot of ways you can play them, and spells that you can choose from. Particularly with clerics, you can make them very versatile, because you can replace their spells every single day. So you kind of have that automatic, oh, this is an aspect of me that you can really play around with and have fun with. And also, at least with clerics, they're very versatile. And paladins are very fun as well, I think, in the same way, though they're not as versatile spell-wise, because charisma is one of their better stats that you want to have really high. It does mean you can kind of be the face of the group and do a lot of the social stuff, which makes you kind of versatile in that way instead. However, in a game like Final Fantasy XIV, I don't play it anymore, but I did play it for a while, and one of my favorite classes was Astrologian, which I'm sure that some of you are groaning at already. It was very cumbersome to play, but it had a really fun theme to it, because it was all about the cosmos and the stars, and you have this deck of cards that you use to enact certain abilities and buffs and stuff. So it was really fun getting to look at that and getting to apply those buffs. And mind you, I played primarily back when Astrologian was still very randomized. So it was fun getting to kind of improvise and adapt on the fly to things. And do I actually want to give this buff to the person it's most valuable for? Do I want to give it to someone who needs it at this moment? Stuff like that. I don't think I'm giving a great answer here, actually. I think at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, a class that really lets you think about what you're doing and how you want to do it is the best class to play, regardless of how that manifests. Because it means you get to do more in your game than just go, I use my basic attack for X amount of damage over and over and over again. And I think those are really fun when it involves some strategy and involves some fun ways of looking at things. So yeah, a shameless plug here to go play Kids on Bikes, because that's basically the entirety of Kids on Bikes, is improvising and finding fun ways to do things. So yeah. Let's see next. Thank you for your question, Zed. I almost forgot to say thank you for your question. Let's see. Lily Von Ramstein 07 asks, what is your favorite audio to do so far? I don't know. I have a lot of favorites for various reasons. Honestly, not to sound super cliche, but like some of the commissions I've done have been amazing. I feel bad bringing them up because I feel a little bit like I'm trying to promote them and be like, well, I do commissions. They're closed currently, as of me saying this, in August 6th, 2026. They're closed. So, but that to say, yeah, some of the commissions I've done really have been awesome. I really like getting to work alongside people in the community with those audios, and I like to get to hear their thoughts, the kind of audios and tropes that they like. It really helps to inspire me to make different audios as well. It helps me to see what other people want and kind of branch out from there, especially when I notice, multiple people or a person getting multiple commissions that focus on a particular aspect of my audios that I've been lacking in creating. I guess, for example, going to actually one of the first topics of this Q&A, I get a lot of commissions requesting like meaner or teasier giants. And as I'm pretty sure I've said plenty of times, I really do struggle with mean giants and keeping that balance of like, I'm a total a-hole who wants you to suffer, and this is a relaxing audio, so you need to actually be able to relax. So when folks come to me and they say like, okay, I want an audio with a mean giant, but what if they weren't cruel? Maybe they were just terse, or they were grumpy, or maybe they are mean, but it's because of this reason, or maybe they're mean because there's a misunderstanding, so once the misunderstanding's cleared up, they're nice again. Or maybe they are just mean, but they have a certain set of morals that keeps the listener out of mortal danger, or whatever, and that's really fun, and so therefore I get to learn from you guys. Same thing with the giant listener audios. I didn't do those for a long time because, in part, I didn't really know how. I didn't really know how to make audios where I played the smaller party without feeling really weird about it. But I didn't really know if there was a strong audience for it. So having folks come in and go, hey, I'd really like it if you could do an audio like this, where the listener is big, or an audio like this, where the listener has recently been grown to a ridiculous size, or where they get to use this magical power they have, blah, 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 blah. And I think that's really awesome. I think it's great getting to, in that sense, experiment and also see what I could be doing better in my channel. So, yeah, those are some of my favorite audios. But if we're not talking about commissions, if we're talking exclusively of just stuff that I've made of my own volition, the thing is, I have a lot of audios that I think are good quality. I think, like, for example, the current series I'm doing right now with Clement has been really fun, but I wouldn't say they're my favorite to record. I think maybe the first audio I did with Atos, the space wolf, I really like voicing him. He's got like a really fun voice, and he's got this gravelly kind of sound to him. And he's also kind of a jerk, but like a lovable one, because he really just wants everyone to be happy at the end of the day. And I really love getting to design the ambience in his audios as well, and the ambient music especially. I'm not a musician. I don't want to be a musician. This is not something, I'm not gonna, I don't plan, I should say. I don't plan on making like a separate music channel, but I really do like doing the ambient music and stuff for Atos's audios. So yeah, he's kind of just like a fun way of testing out my abilities, stretching my legs a little bit. So I really like him. I think that first audio was really fun. It had a nice vibe to it overall. 10 out of 10. So thank you for your question, Levon Ramstein07. I do appreciate it. Let's see, next is Tiger Gamer 123, who asks a world-building question that I've been curious about for a while. I apologize if my wording sounds weird, or if this has been talked about already. I tried my best to make my rambling make sense. So, do anthropomorphic animals exist in your little world you created? I don't mean creatures like Ryback, where it's basically a human with animal ears or whatever. I mean actual animals that can talk and live human lives. Probably something like your space wolf Atos, but I don't think he counts since he's in a different world from your main one. And yeah, he's, if nothing else, from the far, far future. So, even if he's in the same universe overall, he's definitely not, connected to the other events. Anyways, if yes, how would each of your characters, like Clement or Chaudry, etc., interact with them if they ever met one, since they're different from the average humans? And if not, what's the reason they don't exist in that world? The concept of humans and anthro-animals coexisting with each other has fascinated me for a long time, and I was wondering if your world that you created had any living in it, especially since it has other types of similar animal-like creatures, like the Naga or the Harpy, in the one time where Chaudry turned into a mousefolk. So yeah, the Sauceverse, so to speak, does have an anthro characters. To be frank, honestly, I'm surprised I've gone this far without having any of them present as a main character outside of, like, technically Atos. But he's a werewolf, so, him being from the future and him being a werewolf, like you said, I'm not sure he counts. I really should fix that at some point. More to the point, though, I have had a couple of unfortunately scrapped characters along these lines, including my persona, Blythe, who is an anthropomorphic bunny man. A few other characters, including like mouse folks, kobolds, and other rather small critters. I know in my persona's case, he is just really similar to Aether. Just he actually like is still at a magical university. So I felt like having two kind of standoffish mages who are mostly just there to insult you in a vaguely well-meaning way could be really tiring. So I didn't want to include him because I felt like it would just be very samey. That said, I'm not too sure how my characters would react. I think for most of them, the trouble is they've seen like similar enough creatures that they wouldn't be like particularly off-put by seeing a proper anthro animal. People like Chaudry, Aether, the Curious Naga, and Clement probably wouldn't really bat an eye to them. I do imagine that like maybe like Ryback could be kind of interesting, because I think like being an animal person himself, he's got his little cat ears, little cat tail, and that's it. I think that because he is very fond of like getting pampered and getting his fur brushed and stuff like that, he would be inclined to, like, if he ever made a friend who is like an anthro animal, he'd want to do that with him and like do like a little spa day with him. But I feel like that's really the big trouble. Is I feel like most people have probably seen Weirder, so they probably wouldn't really be all that phased. I mean, even Nathan deals with like Fae, so he's kind of got that going for him. But I think if I had to decide like someone who would be like the most interesting interactions, it'd probably be Hugh. Like I said, he lives in a relatively human-sized, human-born kind of college town. So I imagine he's probably seen like a few people with animal features or people with like some like strange qualities, what is it, digitigrade legs, like deer or dogs have. He's definitely seen some of them, but I feel like he probably hasn't interacted with them a whole lot just by virtue of like not really needing to. Like you don't go to every person in your uni and say, "Hey, let's hang out." But yeah, I feel like he would be like a little bit weirded out by like animal creatures because they don't look like something he's familiar with, so he wouldn't really be sure of how to react. He wouldn't really be sure like what is socially acceptable. I think given his time with like tinies, he would probably ask them a lot of questions though. Because I don't think he'd be put off. I don't think he'd be like, "Oh, well, you're a freak and I don't want to talk to you." I think he'd just be very much like, "Oh, I'm really not sure of how to proceed here." And so with that in mind, he'd probably ask them a lot of questions, be very much like, "How should I interact with you? How can I make you feel valuable and special? What should I consider when I'm talking to you or about you? Like, can I call you by your animal species? Like, for example, so can I say you're a fox? Or do I have to say like you're a fox person? An anthropomorphic fox? Like what do I, is that rude? Is it like dehumanizing?" So I think he'd probably just be very prone to asking questions and would also probably be very prone to like being a bit stiffly polite with them because he really doesn't want to make them feel bad. He wants to make sure that they feel good about themselves. So yeah, I think aside from that, most people probably would be kind of boring. And I definitely think I should include anthro characters because, like I said, it's kind of a shock that I haven't yet. It's a shock that I haven't yet included one. So, oh well, something to put on the checklist. Thank you for your question, Tiger Gamer. Let's see. Next up, we have Fluffy Clementine, who asks, "Will you make more audios with the listener as a giant?" Making a reference to your latest video about the short roommate. It was one of my favorite works yet. So thank you. I'm glad you liked it. That is the plan, yes. I do actually recall at one point that it had been my plan to feature at least one giant POV audio every month this year. And I'm not really sure why I didn't wind up following through with that. But it is my hope to start featuring more giant POV audios, and hopefully I will actually stick to that plan of having at least one giant POV a month moving forward. Because, yeah, it's something, like I said a little bit briefly previously, I wasn't really sure the audience I had of giants in the audience. I know that there are a lot of people who like enjoy being small, and so I didn't really want to. I really didn't want to alienate people by being like, "And now in this one, you're big." But seeing how many folks really like being the big one, I feel encouraged to do more. I feel like now that I know that there's going to be an audience for it, and you guys will really appreciate it, like I'm like, how could I not, so yeah, definitely in the plans. But of course, if you guys have suggestions about what you'd like to see with a giant POV audio, please do let me know. I try to take suggestions into account when working on my schedule for each month. Obviously I do have quite a bit prepared ahead of time, so if you ask a suggestion in like May, you might not hear it until next May or later. But I do try to take them into account. I do try to see what ideas I can include and what ideas I can use to shape my existing plans. So yeah. Thank you so much for your question, Fluffy Clementine. I hope you look forward to what's in the future. Next is from A. Ryan, who asks, when did you discover the GT community, and what was it like learning that there were other people who liked GT? So this one's kind of a weird one to answer. I didn't actually even write anything down, which I probably should have done, but prepare for a bit of a ramble. I know at the time I was using the 2DS. I know this because it had an internet feature, and that's how I looked up stuff, so that nobody would know what I was doing. So I remember I was with that in mind, I definitely didn't get the 2DS like day one. So it was probably when I was 14 or 15 that I finally began connecting with the specifically the macro micro kind of not safe for work community. And I say this because that was what I first encountered, and that was really all I knew for a long time. And I knew that there were people who liked GT in a safe for work sense, but I usually found them through not safe for work like outlets. Like, for example, I'd go into Tumblr and I'd find, this macro micro kinkster blog, and they would repost some of the more safe for work stuff that some people did, and just talk about like, oh, this is really hot. It's really cool seeing like this particular size dynamic. I think that's really, really sexy. And full clarity, full stop, before anyone goes to the comments and says like, yes, they're kinksters, they deserve to be put down. No. I also like GT in a kinky and fun way. I'm an adult. I'm allowed to do that. And everyone should be allowed to do that. And I hold no judgment to people who like that. But for the sake of this story and recounting what happened with me, I do want to make that clear. When I first found this, I found it through a not safe for work way. And on one hand, that made it very... I felt very excited because I was like, okay, there are people who like this too. There are people who like the bigness, the smallness, the interactions. There are people who like that sort of thing. But because I found it through primarily not safe for work means, it also came with like a great deal of like shame in that sense, because obviously I was quite young and also quite sheltered, and I was a sheltered, homeschooled, autistic kid, and so I was an outcast for a lot of reasons. And I had no friends. Let's just get that one out of the way. So I really didn't need another reason to think I was a freaking weirdo. But here was one. Oh, and I was closeted. So if I needed any more reason to think that I was a total messed up, like, screw up of nature, that was another one. But anyways, so I remember I, was very excited to see that people liked the same kind of stuff I did, but I also felt very, further outcast by it. And because I couldn't interact with anybody, because I was a minor in an adult space, and I didn't want someone to find out I was a minor and report me to the mega police and I'd get arrested for being a minor. I really felt both relief and also a lot of shame for it. And also because of that, my perception of GT was kind of skewed, because when I would see safe work stuff, I wouldn't really understand why it existed, because if it was just a weird kink thing, then, or if it was just a kink thing, not a weird kink thing, all kinks are inherently weird, but if it was just a kink thing, then why were people doing these things of a little fairy in the forest? Why were people just doing cuddle time between a mousefolk girl and her boyfriend? And so I didn't understand that, so I presumed, therefore, that those people weren't actually into GT, they were into just they just so happened to draw pictures that included it. And I didn't really understand that, no, there was a safe workspace for GT. And I didn't really understand that macro, micro, and GT were two different things. So that in mind, that is kind of what helped me to create this channel. So I don't regret it, obviously, because, it was one of those things where I would want to create something that involved GT in a very safe for work way, mind you. This wasn't, I wasn't being super out there. I mean, I don't think most of this channel's content is super out there. But I would want to make the most like milquetoast kind of GT stuff. And I would be ashamed of it because I'd be like, oh my gosh, my friend's going to see this and they're going to see that I'm a massive, kinky little sex fiend. Like I thought that that was what defined, being a GT enjoyer. And so I was like, they're going to see this and they're going to hate me. So I made this channel as a kind of a safe haven of that to explore and to let people know they're not alone. And then, in my efforts to let other people know they're not alone, I found out that I myself was not alone. And in fact, there's an entire community of lovely people like you guys who like GT in the exact same way I like GT, and who want to explore it in a way that I want to explore it. And, since then, I've connected on Blue Sky. I've connected quite a bit on Tumblr. I have a Tumblr now. I follow so many people. So many of you guys are amazing. I really do just love seeing the stuff you guys create, and it inspires me so much. And in that sense, I did discover the GT community back in 2013, 14, 15, somewhere in that range. But it wasn't really until just recently when I made this channel that I really connected to it. And in that sense, it's been really freeing, and it's been really nice to connect to you lovely people and to see that, I'm not alone. And it's nice learning, I guess, kind of the depth of people's enjoyment. Like I said, some people really do enjoy it because it's hot. It's hot as fuck. And some people enjoy it because it's sweet and intimate. Some people enjoy it because it lets them express themselves in new and exciting ways. Some people enjoy it because that's what they want to be. They actually, if they had the chance in real life to be absolutely massive or absolutely minuscule, they'd take it. That's how they see themselves. That's how they view themselves. And I think that's just so great. It really does genuinely bring me such joy, and it makes me really feel honored that I get to be a part of it. And maybe that's sappy, maybe that feels contrived, I don't know. But yeah, I have never felt like I belonged so much in a space than with the GT community. So yeah, thank you guys for having me in that sense. Thank you guys for being so accepting of me and for letting me bring what I offer to the table, even in its many out there forms and its many milquetoast forms. So yeah, thank you. And thank you for your question, A. Ryan. I do appreciate it. Next question. Sorry for that 10-minute ramble. Next question, Elaine asks, will there be another story with Zoa as the main character in the future, or with Zoa being a giant in comparison to the listener? I hope so. I won't lie. I was a little bit worried. So for anyone not aware, Zoa is the Naga woman who is Atos's boss, Atos being the space wolf. I was a little bit worried with her reception because she is just like me. and I am a very cisgender man. So I was kind of not just sure how people would like take her presentation and take her voice, given that she's a very femme like character. Um, but I've been pleased by y'all's reception of her, especially because this is a personal thing I didn't write down, but Zoe was very much inspired by some of my favorite bosses I've had to work with in the past, it's like time I've been working. And so kind of being able to, I won't say like immortalize them because I'm not really, but like, being able to bring them into my audios and see people being so receptive to them is really nice. That being said, I would like to bring her more prominently into Atos' story somehow. I think that she's a very important person to Atos, of course, given that she's not just his boss, but also like someone that he and his siblings and his family are very close to. So I do want to include her more. I'm not really sure as of this exact moment how exactly she'll fit into the larger narrative or the sci-fi setting that Atos is in. But I do want to incorporate her more, absolutely, and I think it would be kind of fun, if only for like an audio or two, to give her like her own little side story where she gets to do her own things, and we get to explore who she is outside of just being the boss of Atos. And as for Zoa being like a giant in comparison to the listener, like I could definitely see about that. With Atos' story specifically, his listener is definitely like small but not tiny in the way that I've previously described them. But I could definitely see about an audio where like the listener, whether it be like Atos' specific listener or someone else, when the listener is quite small compared to Zoa, or she's quite large compared to them. Especially, like I said, if she gets her own little like side story, I think it'd be fun to do something like that. So yeah. Thank you for your enjoyment of this particular character, and thank you for your question, Lane. I do appreciate it. Let's see. Next, DTR Cat asks, could you do an audio where Clement is hungry? Yeah, I mean, I can see about that sometime. Yeah, I know that a lot of folks do enjoy the stomach growls. I will say, as someone who struggles with recording and editing like eating sounds specifically, like chewing or like crunching or slurping, I'm really not sure I'd ever do like an audio of him eating food necessarily. But having him like have a hungry stomach would be doable. Maybe have an audio where he's cooking and the listener can join in. I don't know. I will say something that this is kind of semi-obscure lore. I've mentioned it a couple times, but like it's so spaced out that I really don't fault anyone for not knowing it. Something that I have as Clement's lore is that giants do have this period where their stomach is active, and this period where their stomach is inactive. When their stomach's inactive, they don't really feel like a big hunger because they kind of hibernate, sort of. They get very sluggish. They don't have to eat much, if anything at all. Usually they like can live off of the store that they've eaten up to that point. And so they're very safe for their stomach to enter when their stomach is inactive, because there's like nothing that could work you down. So during that period, it's very safe to be in Clement's stomach. When his stomach is active, it's a very dangerous period, and so it's not a good idea to be in his stomach. So that's something that I do kind of try to subscribe to when it comes to his audios, is that when he's hungry, you definitely don't want to be inside of him, and he wouldn't want you to be inside of him. But when he's not hungry, he's fine. So in theory, though, like I suppose I could see about doing an audio where like maybe the listener's gotten some like magical acid protection or something, and they want to test it out. But yeah, I'm not sure if Clement himself would be up to that, but it is something. It is something. I could definitely, if nothing else, see about an audio where he's hungry and his stomach is growling and he's talking about maybe finding what to eat. I don't know. Thank you though for your question, DTR Cat. Let's see, next, Zoara asks a couple of questions over on the Patreon. Zoara asks, number 1, in some of your audios, I believe primarily the first audio that Oliver was in, it's been mentioned that size directly affects magical ability. The larger you are, the easier it is to channel. Please clarify if I'm not getting that 100% correct. If that's the case, how exactly do fairies and pixies factor into that system? So an excellent question to start out with. You are correct in understanding how magic works, generally speaking. Magic requires a conduit, and sun magic specifically, there are kind of 2 major branches of magic. The first is sun magic, which is the strain of magic that is more immediate and fast acting, and that uses its user as the conduit. So you are the one channeling the magic in and out of you. Moon magic, which is more like rituals and slow acting magic, can use a third-party conduit such as a crystal or a wand or a focus or whatever. That sort of thing. So with that being said, sun magic, if you're a larger being, you'll be able to focus more magic and store magic within you, and thus you'll be able to cast larger and stronger spells. Moon magic doesn't really matter at all. Of course, there are probably ways to circumvent this, so I don't think it's like solely a case of larger equals better. Particularly, I would say to note Aether, the Vogue Mage, as a good example, because they can be they're shorter than most people. I forget their exact height, but I remember they're quite squatty, if I'm remembering correctly. But their visual form is different from their actual form. So in that sense, they are able to channel more magic into themselves because they have like a larger, like, arcane incorporeal form. But I'm getting off track. As for how fae work, and specifically smaller fae like pixies can factor into this system, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I've left a lot of the fae stuff unexplored in my world building so far, in part because I feel like it's fitting. Like, our good neighbors are very mysterious creatures. They work in strange ways, and they are kind of an enigma, and I think there is a certain degree of we shouldn't know how they work, because if we knew, then, well, that would be that, and we could, counter everything they do, and we would be able to, overpower them in a sense. And I think that there's a certain charm in not really knowing how to work around them. But if I had to give an answer, like a specific answer for, like, for example, like commission purposes, or for anyone who wants to design a character to fit in the Sauceverse, I would say I think Fey magic works differently than Mortal-born magic. In particular, I think it relates to kind of pixie dust, where pixie dust is, in a sense, magic in a physical form. Like, if you want to think about it, it's a bit like how sugars are basically just energy given physical form. That they are stored energy in a physical form. So to sort of circumvent the problem of, like, oh, this is a tiny creature, therefore it shouldn't be able to cast that much magic, Fae would have this supply of pixie dust, which allows them to bolster their own abilities. And I reckon it's like a near endless supply that is stored in some sort of pocket dimension, or like abstractly held within them. Maybe they have like a certain amount they produce every day, and thus, like, it's not like literally infinite, but it's like, they store it over time. But yeah, I would say that that's kind of how that works. Is basically pixie dust is physical form of magic that when they use it, it can activate to do whatever spells and magical properties they need it to. And for anyone curious, as I know that Nathan, the chill mechanic, uses pixie dust, I do believe that it can do more than just shrink people. But I think that that's just primarily what Nathan uses it for. So I think it's more just like Nathan in particular just has a specific use for it, while the Fae have numerous random uses they might be inclined towards. So yeah, that's what I would say is how I would generally classify it. Is they don't need to have a specific size because they have kind of this stored form of magic. Though, as I said with like Aether, there's also the possibility that their physical forms are different from the amount of like their connection to the arcane. I don't know. Like I said, I've left it pretty much up in the air. So hopefully that answers your first question. Your second question was, what appetizers do you get at restaurants? Boy, I don't really get appetizers often, but when I do, it's probably like cheese fries or fried pickles, or if it's like a Mexican restaurant, I will get chips and guacamole. So yeah, I guess that kind of tells you the kind of restaurants I usually go to. Mostly like pub style restaurants. The third question was, I don't know if this has been asked before, but how would your characters feel about singing in public, like karaoke or like a stage performance type deal? Great question. I think I have somewhat answered this question before, or at least answered similarly, but I have no idea where the answer would be. So, yeah, soft reset on it, I guess. I think the people who would be most open to do it would be like Hugh and maybe Clement, and probably like Nathan as well. Though I imagine like Nathan is kind of like, depending on how he like up for it he is, also kind of depends on how inebriated he is. Oliver as well, probably. I feel like he, being like from this like holy order, would probably be okay with like doing musical performances because he's used to like talking to groups of people. I think probably the Curious Naga would like karaoke, but not like doing a stage performance. So the people I feel like would like probably do it with others, but like not all by themselves, would be like Chaudry and Ryback, and probably like the Gentle Friend. Though of course the Gentle Friend does kind of have, he is kind of an anthological character. He's not like a set person, so you know, take that with a grain of salt. And the people I think would be a very hard sell would be like Neil, the short roomie, and Atos. And I don't think Aether would do it like at all. I think they are just not a musical person. I feel like they sing with their partner, the harpy, because they love him, but they would not sing in public with him. I think that's like everyone of note. If I've missed someone, feel free to tell me. And the last question that Zora has asked is, which of your boys would be the Heathers from Heathers, and which ones would they be? So, okay, I thought about this, and I actually had to rearrange my answers quite a few times. So, for Heather Chandler, the HBIC, I could see Aether the Bog Mage. Like, they're hot shit, and they know they're hot shit. And they're very much not afraid to make sure people know that. And plus, I feel like they have this bonus in that they could literally use magic to slap your face off. So, yeah, you know, watch out, man. For Heather Duke, I think I'd go with Nathan. Like, obviously he's quite a nice fellow for people he likes. And I think that would potentially make him work better as McNamara. But I do think, I think he has this mean streak that he's done his best to bury. And I think his use of magic for more like vigilante reasons, works really well in this scenario. Because like in that same sense, like Aether the Bog Mage like has this immense rule of magic, and Nathan has this kind of more subtle rule. So I think that kind of works with how like Heather Duke kind of submits to Chandler's rule. So Nathan would submit to Aether's rule as the head of the group. But like, should Aether ever stop being in control, he'd take over pretty easily, I think. And finally, for Heather McNamara, I feel like it would have to be Neil, right? Like the short roomie. Because he's got this very sweet, very soft and loving side to him, but he's also got this kind of like guilt and sensitivity that he's holding on to, particularly because he knows he can go overboard with his actions at times. But like in his very first audio, he does like threaten the listener, and he does let that very catty and hurtful side of him out. So I think if that side were like fostered, he'd be a really good sort of sidekick to Nathan and Aether. But on his own, I think he'd be a pretty nice person overall. I think he just kind of fell into a bad crowd in that case. And I know you didn't ask, but I felt like I had to round out the main cast, so I think Chaudry would be Veronica, because I feel like he does kind of like look before he leaps a little bit. He gets very close to people very easily, but he doesn't always know how to maintain those friendships. And I think he does kind of like look at the past and wonder how he got where he is, and like, is this the direction in life he wants to be going? And I feel like for JD, it would have to be Atos, because he's got this like rebellious delinquent side to him, and he would not mind putting some people he deems unworthy out of their misery. Do I think he'd plan to bomb a school? No. But, you know, I think overall, all these characters like are a bit too nice for their roles anyways, so, you know, I guess that's, you know, maybe a positive, maybe a negative. Maybe it means I need to create crueler characters to voice. But yeah, thank you for your question, Zoar. I do appreciate it. Let's see. Next, also on Patreon, Cotton Candy Bar asks, is Nathan into stuff like fear play or playfully eating a tiny? Yes. In particular, as I mentioned, he got this vigilante streak. And so he's very fond of scaring the crap out of people that he thinks need to be taught a lesson. He definitely is very much into that, like, I am big and scary and I will make you piss your pants. But even outside of that, I think he does enjoy kind of being able to do the meaner, teasier, more playful aspects of being a giant. He's very much like in it for like the drama of it all. He likes the incitement. So yeah, I do think that like if someone were to ask him specifically, like, hey, could you pretend to be like really mean and like trap me under a glass and threaten to like fry me up in a frying pan, he'd be like, sure, whatever you want, honestly. I think he'd be down. And even with like the more playful stuff, I think he just enjoys himself when it comes to the size difference. I think he just likes the size difference in general. So whatever it gets to manifest from that. So thank you very much for your question, Cotton Candy Bar. And finally, the last patron to ask a question was Ubas. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Who asks, would you ever do a new and updated version of your stomach stats post with information about your newer characters? I'd love to see it. Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone who doesn't know, I believe I posted it on my Patreon for free. And like nowhere else, I don't think. Because this was a long time ago before I was really on socials. But I found this template online by an 18+ artist named Drellard, I believe is how you pronounce that. They're on like Twitter, Blue Sky, and I think other places as well. And basically it was a template set up for people's stomach stats. It was set up in like a hexagon to go over their stomach capacity, control over their stomach, their endurance, appetite, how fast and how powerfully they could digest people. And yeah, I did it back in the day for like Clement, Chaudry, Ryback, Nathan, Aether, Hugh, and the Curious Naga. But I'd be happy to redo them to better fit the characters nowadays, and also add in the newer cast. I think that could be fun. I'd have to relocate the template and remember what all the stats represent. But yeah, I think that'd be fun, and I could actually post it to my social medias this time. So yeah, thank you for your question, Ubas. And now for the last part of this audio, this Q&A, I will be dedicating to a game review. So you lovely people over on Patreon had voted for me to end this Q&A with a game review, and the game that you guys decided on of a series of games with GT themes was Size Matters. Now, Size Matters is a game where you play presumably a scientist trying to navigate around one of a couple different environments while steadily losing your size, with the goal being to create an antidote for the thing that's causing you to shrink. To do this, you need to use a number of devices to combine liquids together, or turn one liquid into a different liquid. And to do that, you need to locate not only the liquids you'll be needing, but also a series of formulas, which in my experience were a combination of one liquid plus either another liquid, or an instruction to be used with a particular machine. For example, adamantium plus the microwave equals papium, or something like that. Through this process, you'll make a number of keys, which you can then assemble into one final cure, thus winning you the round. Now, as some of you may be aware from either a past experience or just having heard of this particular concept before, this game did take some pretty solid inspiration from a similar game called Inch by Inch. They got the same core ideas, though from what I was able to see, Size Matters has self-identified to be an easier time focused more around enjoying the experience and the environment. And I will also say the Inch by Inch developers have, as far as I was able to find out, condoned the development of Size Matters. So, game-wise, I found the game was pretty fun. It's got some fun size-based concepts I think work really well. The idea of having to sort of prepare the area while you're large so that you can navigate it when you become small is an awesome concept. There are like things like boxes or planks, various long objects you can set up to make bridges between two platforms, or things you can use to make staircases. I think that was kind of fun. It also lets you prioritize a bit and encourages you to be very thrifty with your space usage, because you don't want to be running around all over the place looking for something that you left halfway across the room or something like that. You want to make sure that you're conserving your time as much as possible. I also think its compact nature, being a rather simple gameplay loop of find the stuff, build the solutions, works really well in this game's favor. It really does work to highlight the environment, which has a few different locations and a few different themes. I found the house in particular to be quite fun, as it felt like a fun little switch up from the lab setting the game initially takes place in. In terms of cons, it is a rather short, somewhat repetitive cycle, where you find various ingredients and combine them together or put them in various places. With the most interesting thing typically just being, how do I get from one space to the next? I found that after only a few playthroughs, the gameplay kind of became a bit repetitive to me. Granted, I'm not a chore game enjoyer. I don't tend to enjoy things that are kind of just do this for the sake of it. So, take it with a grain of salt. I also didn't really care for things like Power Wash Simulator or Viscera Cleanup Detail. But with this game, I just found it being a little bit stale after a few runs. And we'll also say that a few times I would find an item placed in a spot that was a bit awkward to get to without some very awkward stacking of items. And that often kind of just felt like more of a time waster than an actual part of the puzzle. Trying to, stack myself so I could wedge into this particular area or get this specific shelf on a group of them. It became a little bit frustrating. I think that maybe I just wasn't playing it right, but it did feel at times like I kind of just had to pray I could grab something with a good jump, than actually like I was trying to puzzle out how to get something in a hard to reach area. However, in terms of GT, in terms of how well this works with the concept of GT, I think the game does a serviceable job if you're looking for purely a GT shrinking experience. The game's intent is to let you start out large and then adapt to your surroundings as you get smaller. And I think this alone makes it an interesting experience from a GT standpoint because it's designed with your eventual difference in size in mind. I will say there aren't any NPCs around that I could find, though maybe there are and I simply missed that level or that particular option. But with that in mind, it does mean that the only scale you really get is your own. As you become, less able to lift things, less able to navigate, as you have to struggle more to reach certain surfaces. While this works for the game, of course, I do think it means that, again, purely from the perspective of a GT experience, it does feel lacking in that regard, as the only thing that changes is how easily you can interact with the world. In that regard as well, the game has relatively simple graphics, which again serves its purpose well. The simple graphics let you enjoy the particular environment without getting lost in the clutter or having to wade through a bunch of tiny details or various like trash objects lying around just to find something. That said, it does also mean that when you're playing the game at a tiny height, the simplicity tends to show a little bit. Again, I think this works from a gameplay perspective. It keeps the game from needing to run too many items through a physics engine. It keeps from getting important objects lost under clutter or the like. It works absolutely in a gameplay perspective. However, from a strictly GT perspective, it does kind of mean that when you're tiny and you're already struggling a bit to navigate, you don't really get the reward from being able to see things up close. It kind of just feels like you're just more zoomed in on the environment rather than you're a tiny navigating this massive, detailed, sprawling space. So overall, I'd say that from a GT enjoyer's point of view, the game's like a 6 out of 10. It works for what it's designed for, but it really isn't anything to write home about. If you're looking for a game that lets you puzzle your way through an ever-expanding environment, it's really good, and I think you should get it. It's also really cheap, if I recall correctly, so definitely, in that regard, why not get it? But at the end of the day, it really is more of a puzzle and adaptation game. It's not really a GT game specifically, which is fine. I don't think it was designed to be such, so, that's perfectly fine. I do personally think, outside of GT, kind of working with it, I do think this game would be benefited by the addition of multiplayer. Playing alone, the frantic scramble to get everything set up was fine for me in single player, but I do think this process with a group of friends could be a remarkably fun experience. I know that when I was streaming it for friends, it felt more fun because we could kind of simulate the experience where I could be like, oh, where is this thing? Where was this? I need to go find it. And people could like yell out about like, oh, it was on the table, or you left it on the counter, or no, you have to go across the bridge. You need to go grab this thing. So that was really fun. So I think it could work well if it had multiplayer, but that said, I also know that adding multiplayer to anything is no small feat, and this game does seem to be kind of in its final state. So if the developer never adds multiplayer, honestly, I understand. It's a fun game regardless. I just think it could be elevated by the ability to share the experience with others. Also, with the point of view of GT, I think it could really help with the GT experience, particularly if other players could be at different sizes, and perhaps even pick one another up if they're at a certain size. You could have one player shrink relatively slowly or start at a larger height, which means that they can sort of watch over the other smaller players. Or you could have items be more easily carried if held by multiple players, encouraging small players to work together, and thus they could see just how teensy they're getting compared to everything. Again, it's not necessary, particularly with the additional work that my ideas would add. It would probably be a lot of work for the satisfaction of very few people, but it's a fun thought. If this were like the blue sky phase, it will be a fun thought. Something I will say that I thought was funny as well, if you play the tutorial, you'll earn a lot of the achievements just kind of by default. Things like finding every formula within a certain time period, or generating a cure without any slip-ups, etc. It's not a bad thing. It's just kind of funny in my opinion. It really does encourage you to play the tutorial because you'll get like half the achievements just by doing that. So yeah, overall, I think it was a really fun game. Size Matters is delightful. And having played the original itch.io version of Inch by Inch that was made for the Game Jam back in the day, I think that this feels like a visually distinct version of the game that I do agree is more focused around kind of being able to enjoy the environment a bit more and being able to kind of just have fun with it rather than feeling like you're having to really race against time and really, like struggle. And it feels a bit more like it's intended to be a little bit more fun, a little bit more loose. It does get a bit stale after a few runs, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that, it's definitely a game that is good for like people who enjoy either like I said, like the kind of chore simulators where you go and do XYZ things over and over again, or people who really like speedrunning, of which I am neither, so probably not the best game for me, but if you like those things, definitely try it out. And yeah, in terms of GT, it's really not a bad game. I as a GT enjoyer, I did like it. I just didn't find myself liking it for the GT. It's like a nice topping, but not really necessary. Like it felt like I said, like a nice topping to it, like a cherry on top, or like sprinkles. You wouldn't eat the sprinkles by themselves, but in addition to the cake itself, it's fine. So yeah, that was my opinion on Size Matters. If you guys would like to hear other little reviews and stuff, do let me know. This was pretty fun. I did buy a couple of different GT games for the sake of looking over them and seeing what I thought. So if you guys would like to hear more thoughts about more games, I'm more than happy to do that. Otherwise, yeah, that's the end of this audio. Thank you all for tuning in as always, and I will talk to you guys later. If I missed anyone's question, do let me know. I double and triple checked, but it's also possible something fell through the cracks. So, yeah, thank you all very much for tuning in, and I will talk with you guys